The kingdom lay in ruins. Idolatry had crept into every hill, every altar, every heart. Judah was no longer the land of promise. It had become a pale shadow of what it once was, and the throne, now abandoned, cried out for something rare, spiritual courage. It was into this chaos that Asa rose, young, unpolished, yet burning with a fire the elders had long forgotten. He did not merely inherit a crown. He inherited a battle against foreign gods, against Canaanite altars, against the rot that had taken root in sacred places. While other rulers fortified borders, Asa tore down pillars of false worship. While courts bowed to tradition, he cast out his own grandmother for erecting a profane shrine. And God watched, and God was pleased. For 10 years the land knew peace, but it was not a peace of comfort. It was a pause, a holy reprieve, a time to rebuild, to prepare the people for what was coming. Because the trial would come, and when it came, it was not with whispers or politics, but with steel. An army of 1 million men marched upon Judah, a flood of warriors vast enough to crush any kingdom, except the one whose king followed the true commander. This is the beginning of Asa's story. The youth who stood against idolatry, the man who faced 1,000,000 foes, the king who trusted in heaven and prevailed. Asa was still young when the crown touched his brow. But he did not inherit a throne alone. He inherited a nation steeped in idolatry. Judah had been carved into a monument for foreign gods. Hills were marked by pagan shrines. Sacred groves were filled with poles to Asherah, and even the royal chambers sheltered carved images hidden behind embroidered curtains. What once was worship had become theater. The sacred mingled with the profane, and the name of the Lord was used to bless rituals that mocked everything holy. But Asa did not walk the same road as his forefathers. He did not seek favor with the corrupted or make peace with decay. He broke the cycle. He shattered altars, hacked down the sacred poles, crushed the pillars, and called the people back to the God of their fathers. It was not politics. It was rebellion. Even within his own bloodline. His grandmother Maacah had erected a vile idol. Asa stripped her of the title of Queen Mother. For him, loyalty to heaven outweighed kinship by birth, and God took notice. The land knew rest for 10 years, not by chance, but by divine reply. While swords lay silent, Asa rebuilt. While borders stood undisturbed, true worship was restored. Yet peace is never eternal. And soon, the eyes of darkness would fix upon Judah. The greatest test still waited beyond the horizon. And the young king would have to prove that the same faith which tears down idols could also stand before armies. Asa's early reign was marked not by war, but by quiet rebuilding. With the pagan altars torn down and the people turning once more to the Lord, Judah entered a rare season, a decade of true peace. No invasions, no revolts, just harvests, growth, and restoration. But Asa didn't waste it. While calm ruled the borders, he focused on the soul of the nation. He re-established the Levites. He rebuilt the sacred practices. He reinforced the walls, trained the soldiers, and watched the skies. He knew the silence was not forever. Asa understood the rhythm of time. He used the bright days to prepare for the dark. His confidence was never placed in swords, yet he sharpened them. He trusted in God, but he prepared the people. And then the silence broke. From the south, the earth began to rumble. Zerah the Cushite was advancing, not with an army, but with a horde, 1,000,000 men, a wave of steel and horses, enough to crush any kingdom caught unaware. Asa did not panic. He did not seek foreign treaties. He did not delay. He marched to the battlefield, and there, with the enemy approaching, he did what few would have dared. He stopped and prayed. Upon the plains of Mareshah, surrounded by soldiers, Asa lifted his gaze and said, "O Lord, it is nothing with thee to help, whether with many or with them that have no power. Help us, for we rest on thee." No war cry, no clever scheme, just faith in full voice. A king standing before his army, yet kneeling in spirit before his God. And that is where the course of history turned. For when a man leans more on heaven than on horsemen, heaven itself comes to fight. For a brief moment, the plains of Mareshah stood still. On one side, Judah's soldiers fixed their eyes on their king. On the other, the horizon writhed with a tide of blackened steel, a wall of spears, horses and chariots swelling toward them. The dust rose, the roars of the enemy cracked like thunder. And yet Asa had already made his choice. He knew whom he trusted. What followed cannot be explained by weaponry. Judah did not triumph through force or strategy. The account is unambiguous. The Lord struck down the Cushite army before Asa's eyes. Something unseen unraveled their ranks. The rhythm of their chariots faltered. Their lines broke. Confusion spread like fire. What was once a sea of power dissolved into panic and retreat. Judah pursued them to Gerar, cutting down the remnants. They claimed the spoils, tents, livestock, camels, gold. But far greater than riches was the return of safety, wrested back by a people who remembered their covenant. This was not merely a military success. It was a message. Judah was not mighty because of numbers, but because of faithfulness. And Asa understood that. He did not glorify himself. He built no statue, gave no speech. He returned home and raised an altar. The peace that followed stretched 35 years, a rarity in any king's reign. But it was not luck. It was the fruit of surrender. Asa did not prevail by the strength of his hand, but by the posture of his heart. And in choosing to trust the unseen when faced with the impossible, Asa's name was etched into the pages of eternity. Judah's triumph over the Ethiopians brought a peace few generations had known. The land flourished, crops yielded in abundance, cities grew stronger, and Asa reigned with unwavering resolve. Yet danger had not vanished. It had simply shifted its ground. The borders were quiet, but within the walls, something began to fracture. The same king who once shattered idols and knelt in Maresha began to trust more in his position than in the one who had placed him there. He did not return to pagan shrines. He did not rebuild the groves of Asherah, but slowly, subtly, he stopped seeking the voice that had once guided every step. When trial came again, Asa was not the man he had been. Threats arose from the northern kingdom, but instead of turning to the Lord, Asa turned to Syria. He stripped silver and gold from the temple's treasury and bought an alliance with a former enemy. And it worked. Externally, Israel withdrew, but inwardly, something vital had been lost. A prophet confronted him. He told Asa that because he had leaned on the strength of men and not on the Lord, he had forfeited another great deliverance. And Asa, the king who once tore down altars, now silenced the messenger of heaven. He imprisoned the prophet. He punished the people. The one who had once called a nation back to truth was now crushing the voice that reminded him of it. Years later, Asa's body began to fail. A disease in his feet spread, and the chronicler makes it clear, even then, Asa did not seek the Lord, only physicians, not because healing is sinful, but because Asa no longer turned to God at all. The heart that once moved heaven now stood closed. In the 39th year of his reign, Asa died. He was buried with honor. The people still revered him, but his end stood as a warning carved in silence. The fiercest battles are not waged with swords, they are fought within. And even those who once stood firm against 1,000,000 enemies can fall alone if they cease to listen for the voice that once called them. Asa's reign began like few others. He cleansed the land, smashed idols, trusted in God when defeat seemed inevitable, and he triumphed. But his life remains a solemn reminder. Faith is not a fire kindled once. It must be tended. The same king who knelt before a vast army would later bow to fear. He traded heaven's strength for earthly alliances, and his fall did not come with drama. It came quietly, in silence, one step at a time, until his prayers faded and faith became nothing more than memory. Yet Asa also holds up a mirror to men who started well, to women who once leaned wholly on the Lord, to souls who fought and won spiritual battles, but now feel weary, distant, numb. It's not just about Asa, it's about us. Because idolatry wears many masks. It returns as pride, as control, as misplaced confidence. And the same God who once granted victory still searches the heart. Asa's story does not end with spectacle. It ends with a warning. Not every defeat is visible. Some take root beneath a kingdom that looks intact. The throne remains. The people stay quiet. But the altar lies empty. And if you sense that you once prayed more, trusted more, perhaps the time has come to return, while time remains. Because the most dangerous war is the one we fight alone.